Hey, what up, folks? Welcome to the Film Focus page. I'm going to be giving you my review of the worst films of 2017. Now, 2017 had some fairly disappointing films that show potential, and for me, that were turned out to be quite disappointing. And I was absolutely shocked that I actually sat down and watched it. And for me, there's a lot of films that could have made it to the list, but these are my top 10 films that I thought to be totally disappointing and possibly, just totally boring. So here we go. I'm going to start with number 10, which was Kingsman 2, directed by Matthew Vaughn. Now, the first Kingsman film was absolutely fresh. It was like a breath of fresh air. It was James Bond meet Kick-Ass. And for me, the first film, it was witty, it was original, it had a lot of great one-liners, it had some comic book violence, and it had a great villain in Samuel L. Jackson. The sequel I found to be fairly disappointing. You know what, let me rephrase it, I found it very disappointing. It was, too long. It had too much of everything. It just didn't know which direction it wanted to go in. And it just had too many things going on. And I thought, you know what? Had you had a better villain cut out about a good 20 minutes of the film, you would have had a more consistent film. That would have been on par with the first film. So Kingsman 2 was my most disappointing film of 2017. And one which I will not be getting on DVD. Number 9 on my list is Murder on the Orient Express, directed by Kenneth Branagh. Now for me, after anything, there has been 4 adaptations of Murder on the Orient Express. You had the classic version, directed by, starring Albert Finney, Sean Connery, Lauren Bacall, etc., and directed by Sidney Lumet. And then you had the 2010 version, starring David Suchet, which for me stands as the best version of Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, and is so in line with the book. This film, for me, the updated version of 2017, I found it to be disappointing. They had so many actors, they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. It rebelled against the tradition of the Agatha Christie novel, where it felt more Hollywood standard, where it tried to go for action and suspense. Poirot knew things before people even spoke about them. And as an audience member, I was like, okay, well, how did you jump to that conclusion? And for me, the film was all over the place. It looks good, it's beautifully shot, and it's got some great actors in it, but the film runs out of steam very, very quickly. And I found it to be very, very disappointing and not a good watch. Number 7 on my list was Dark Tower, starring Idris Elba. Now, for me, Idris Elba is a character actor who is very good, but just hasn't had the right script and hasn't had the right lead role. And we can add Dark Tower to this list as well. The film was very disappointing, very boring, and it's a shame because Stephen King novels, the adaptation of those books have been very, very successful. Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, etc. This film falls below those expectations. It's 93 minutes. It's not enjoyable. It's not entertaining. There are a few comedic moments in this film, but then there are other moments which miss their mark. And this film, for me, just wasn't that great. And I found it to be very disappointing. And I hope that Idris Elba gets the right role that he needs to showcase himself as a true talent, because he is a talented actor. Hopefully we will see that with Molly's Game. Number 6 on my list was The Snowman, starring Michael Fassbender. And again, Michael Fassbender, another actor who just hasn't had the right break, He's been good in the X-Men films, but when he's a leading actor, he just hasn't had the right opportunity to do a good script. And this film falls in that category as well. There was no suspense. It just didn't, there's other thrillers out there that I found to be more engaging and more entertaining. And this film just wasn't one. It had a lot of potential on paper, but as a film, it just failed to live up to the mark. So that's why I say Snowman, not a very good watch. Another terrible film of the year, which is my number 5 on the list, is The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise. And that film for me was thoroughly disappointing. It had so much potential, and again, Universal want to do this type of thing where they want to do a monster universe, want to showcase all their monsters, from Dracula, the Werewolf Man, etc. This film is a death knell in that possibility, because it could have been so good, but it started off so poorly. And it ended so poorly. Some of the humor doesn't hit its mark. There are 2 good action sequences, but as a film, I found it to be very boring. I found the ending even more ridiculous, and I think it's possibly one of the worst films of Tom Cruise's career, and I don't think it's one that he's going to look back on in a real hurry. So, that's number 5 on my list of the most disappointing films of the year. The next one on my list, Pitch Perfect 3. Now, for me, it's not a bad film. but it was just a rehash of all the old, you know, Pitch Perfect films. This film lost the magic. This film had, you know, they should have ended it with part 2, but Hollywood being Hollywood, they tried to go for part 3, and then this film was just thoroughly disappointing. It could have ended beautifully. I was hoping for, you know, a threequel in the same vein as, you know, Thor Ragnarok or Logan, but this film was just totally disappointing. Musical compositions were great, but there were a lot of jokes that missed their mark. There was a lot of humor that felt that it was forced, and you could tell that, you know, the cast and crew were getting bored, and that the writing was really, really lazy and wasn't as fresh as the previous 2 entries. So I found that film to be one of my most disappointing films of 2017. Next film on my list, the most disappointing film of the year, was Geostorm. Geostorm, for me, was just absolutely boring. It was a mix between, you know, Independence Day and a whodunit. And it had great visual effects, great action sequences, but you take that away, there is no plot. It was pointless, wasn't entertaining at all. You know, you had Gerard Butler, who pretty much acts the same way that he does in every other film. Andy Garcia, you had, you know, Ed Harris. But as a film, it just wasn't that great. You know, and it's not one that I'll rush in a hurry. It's not one that I recommend that you watch at all, because I found it to be totally disappointing and totally abysmal in every way, shape or form. Next film, we're in my top 3 now, and the third film that I found quite boring was Pirates of the Caribbean 5. And the Pirates of the Caribbean 5 film is another franchise that has just run out of steam. After the first two were absolutely brilliant. The first film, best out of the series. But then when it went to part 3, 4 and 5, the film went downhill. And again, it's like they're just trying to strike where the iron is hot and trying to get as much as they can out of it, but they need to know when they need to let a franchise rest. And there was nothing new that was brought to this franchise. Johnny Depp is on charismatic form as always, but as a film, it just wasn't that great. Some good action sequences, some good jokes, but other than that, the storyline was ludicrous. Javier Bardem is a really good actor, but as a villain in this film, I didn't find him entertaining at all. I thought it was better as Silver in, you know, Skyfall, but this film was just another disappointment. Another disappointment at all. And I think it's one of those films that they need to just leave it to rest now. They've done as much as they can. Number 2 on my list was Justice League. Now, Justice League has just swapped over, has like moved down a place, because I felt that Justice League, after watching it a second time, I thought that it was entertaining in parts, but as a story, it wasn't that great. And that was due to the fact that it had 2 different directors, Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon, two directors with 2 distinct styles, and the film didn't know what it wanted to be. It didn't know whether it wanted to be serious, it didn't know whether it wanted to be comedy, and when those elements came together, it didn't make for a good mix. You know, I mean, you know, Gal Gadot was good in the film. You know, Jason Momoa was good in the film. The guy that played the Flash was really good in the film. But as an overall piece, I found the film to be not great at all. You know, I found it to be quite boring. I found it to be quite tedious in places. And I found the film to be like, you know, it was just confused. It wasn't I just found the film to be very, very confused. It didn't know what it wanted to be. So that's another death knell in the DC Universe staple, but we'll see whether they can redeem themselves with Aquaman in 2018. And my number 1 pick of the worst film of 2017 was Transformers: The Last Night. And again, Transformers is another franchise that has just gone downhill after the first film. And this film is just a rehash of all Michael Bay films. If you know, there is nothing new that was brought to this franchise at all. I saw references to Armageddon, Bad Boys, Pearl Harbor. Nothing new was brought to this franchise at all. And you could see that they were getting desperate for jokes. That you could see that they were getting desperate for anything and just trying to recoup their money back. You know, a lot of money was invested in visual effects, but not on a great plot. And, you know, that film is another franchise that I hope that they put to sleep very, very quickly. I know that Mark Wahlberg said that he won't be returning in the franchise. Michael Bay has stepped away from the franchise. Give it a few years. Let's see if a new director can breathe some life into this film. But as a whole, that has to be the worst film of 2017, and the worst film in the Transformers franchise. So that's my list. And again, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Tell me what you think. Feel free to leave your views, and I shall see you in the new year. So happy New Year, one and all, and thanks for following me. Take care.